Did you know Ho Chi Minh wrote multiple letters to President Truman asking America to be his ally? Ho Chi Minh was born in 1890 in central Vietnam, then under French colonial rule. From a young age, he burned with one desire: to free his country. What most Americans never learned is that Ho Chi Minh deeply admired the United States. He studied the American Revolution. He modeled his own Vietnamese Declaration of Independence on Jefferson's words. In 1945 and 1946, he wrote at least 8 letters to President Truman asking for American support against French colonialism. Not a single letter was answered. That silence changed everything. With no ally in Washington, Ho Chi Minh turned to the Soviet Union and China. The door to partnership closed and a war began to take shape. Over the next 3 decades, America would send 58,000 soldiers to their deaths fighting the very man who once looked to the United States as his model. The Vietnam War didn't have to start the way it did. It began with letters that no one read. Did you know the man who made Christianity the religion of Rome was barely a Christian himself? Constantine was born around 272 AD in what is now Serbia. His father was a Roman military commander, and Constantine grew up fighting his way through the ranks of one of history's most brutal political systems. In 312 AD, before a battle that would decide control of the entire Western Empire, Constantine claimed he saw a vision in the sky and ordered his soldiers to paint Christian symbols on their shields. He won, and everything changed. He legalized Christianity across the Roman Empire and called the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which defined Christian doctrine for centuries. He built churches. He funded the faith. He is still celebrated as the emperor who saved Christianity. But he was not baptized until he was on his deathbed. And in between, he executed his own son and his own wife. Was it genuine faith or genius politics? Historians still argue. Either way, his decisions shaped 2,000 years of civilization. Did you know Einstein helped create the atomic bomb but spent the rest of his life trying to stop nuclear war? Albert Einstein was born in 1879 in Germany. As a child, teachers thought he was slow. He proved them all wrong. In 1905, at just 26 years old, he published work that changed physics forever. His equation E equals mc squared showed that matter and energy were the same thing. The world had never seen a mind like his. In 1939, with World War II approaching, Einstein signed a letter to President Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany might be building an atomic bomb. He urged America to act first. The Manhattan Project began. The bombs were built. When they fell on Japan in 1945, Einstein was horrified. He called it the greatest mistake of his life. For his final 10 years, he fought for nuclear disarmament. The FBI opened a file on him nearly 1,800 pages long and labeled him a security risk. The greatest genius in history died haunted by his own discovery. That is the real Einstein story. Did you know Peter the Great had his own son tortured to death? Peter the Great was born in 1672 in Moscow. From the start, he was obsessed with one thing: dragging Russia into the modern world by any means necessary. He traveled through Europe in disguise, working as a common carpenter in Amsterdam just to learn how to build ships. He came home and built a navy from nothing. He constructed an entire city, St. Petersburg, on top of a swamp. He forced his nobles to shave their beards and wear Western clothes. Russia was transforming at a terrifying speed, but Peter could not allow anything to exist outside his control. Not his army, not his nobles, not even his own son Alexei, who quietly resisted his father's vision. In 1718, Peter had Alexei arrested, personally oversaw his torture, and sentenced him to death. Alexei died in his cell. The bitter irony is that Peter destroyed the one person who could have carried his empire forward. Within decades of his death, Russia began to fracture. He built a nation. He could not build a successor. Did you know Elizabeth I watched her own mother get executed by her father when she was just 3 years old? Elizabeth was born in 1533 to King Henry Vian and Anne Boleyn. When her mother was beheaded on her father's orders, Elizabeth was declared illegitimate and stripped of her place in line for the throne. Her early life was defined by danger. Her own sister, Queen Mary I, had her locked in the Tower of London under threat of execution. Most people in her position didn't survive, but Elizabeth did. In 1558, at 25 years old, she became Queen of England. Every advisor around her insisted she needed a husband to rule. She refused. She governed alone for 44 years, outmaneuvering every political threat thrown at her. In 1588, her navy defeated the Spanish Armada, one of the greatest military forces in the world. England emerged as a global power. The arts, exploration, and trade all flourished under her reign. A woman declared illegitimate at 3 years old built an empire. That is Elizabeth I. Did you know the FBI mailed Martin Luther King a letter telling him to kill himself? Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He grew up in the church, earned his doctorate, and became the voice of a movement that would shake America to its core. Through the late 1950s and early 1960s, King led marches, survived bombings, and went to jail. He gave speeches that made millions believe change was possible. In 1963, he stood in Washington and told the world about his dream. But while America celebrated him, J. Edgar Hoover's FBI was listening to his every phone call, breaking into his hotel rooms, and building a secret file on him. In 1964, the same year King received the Nobel Peace Prize, the FBI mailed him an anonymous letter urging him to end his life. King read it. He understood exactly what his own government was doing to him, and he kept going anyway. That is what makes his story more than a highlight reel. It is a story of a man who knew the full cost and paid it willingly. Did you know Eisenhower warned America about its own military before anyone else dared to? Dwight Eisenhower was born in 1890 in Abilene, Kansas, to a poor family with no connections and no shortcuts. He worked his way up through the Army for decades before anyone noticed. Then World War II changed everything. Eisenhower planned D-Day, the largest military invasion in history, and led the Allies to victory over Nazi Germany. He came home the most celebrated general in America. In 1952, he won the presidency in a landslide. Most people saw a calm, grandfatherly figure who played golf and kept things quiet. But underneath, Eisenhower was fighting a different war. He ended Korea. He refused to send troops into Vietnam when his own generals pushed hard for it. He watched defense companies and military leaders grow richer and more powerful every single year. And then, on his last night in office in January 1961, he went on national television and warned the American people about the military-industrial complex, a permanent war machine that no president could fully control. Nobody listened. Maybe they should have. Did you know Simon Bolivar freed an entire continent and still died believing he had failed? Simon Bolivar was born in 1783 in Venezuela to one of the wealthiest families in South America. He grew up educated in Europe, surrounded by the ideas of freedom and revolution that were reshaping the world. At 32, he launched a campaign to break Spanish rule across the continent. Over the next decade, he rode through jungles, crossed the Andes in winter, and led armies that had no business winning. He liberated Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. An entire continent. 6 nations freed by one man. But the moment the Spanish were gone, everything fell apart. His allies turned on each other. The nations he bled for rejected his vision of unity. Wars broke out along the exact borders he had tried to erase. By 47, he was forced into exile, sick with tuberculosis, and stripped of power. His last words described his life's work as plowing the sea. Bolivar is proof that winning everything is not the same as keeping it. Did you know the most powerful woman in Russian history started with absolutely nothing? Catherine was born in 1729 as a minor German princess with no money, no land, and no future. At 16, she was shipped off to Russia to marry the heir to the throne. Her husband Peter hated her almost immediately and made no secret of it. But Catherine refused to be a footnote. While Peter drank and played with toy soldiers, she read philosophy, learned Russian, and built alliances inside the royal court. She studied power like it was a subject in school. In 1762, she made her move. With the support of the military and key nobles, she overthrew her own husband and declared herself Empress of Russia. Peter was gone within days. What followed was 34 years of rule that transformed Russia into a true European superpower. She expanded the empire further than anyone since Peter the Great, founded the Hermitage Museum, and exchanged letters with Voltaire. History reduced her to a joke. The real Catherine was arguably Russia's greatest ruler ever. Did you know Sitting Bull once performed for crowds the very conquest he spent his life fighting against? Sitting Bull was born around 1831 in what is now South Dakota. He grew up as a Hunkpapa Lakota warrior and became one of the most respected leaders the Plains had ever seen. In June 1876, he led the alliance of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors that wiped out General Custer and over 200 soldiers at Little Bighorn. It was the last great military victory against the U.S. Army in the American West. But winning the battle did not stop what came next. The Army returned in full force. The great buffalo herds were gone within years. His people were starved, hunted, and pushed onto reservations. Out of options, Sitting Bull joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in 1885, performing for the very nation that had crushed his people. He returned to his reservation, and in 1890, when a spiritual revival among his people frightened U.S. authorities, Indian police came to arrest him. He was shot and killed. He won the battle. He lost everything else. Did you know Hernán Cortés burned his own ships so his men couldn't retreat? Hernán Cortés was born in 1485 in Spain. He grew up dreaming of conquest and sailed to the New World as a young man, hungry for glory and gold. In 1519, the governor of Cuba sent Cortés to explore Mexico. But Cortés had bigger plans. He defied his orders, landed on the Mexican coast with just over 500 men, and then did something almost insane. He destroyed his own fleet. No ships meant no going home. His men would conquer or die. What followed was one of history's most brutal and complicated stories. Cortés marched into the heart of the Aztec Empire, ruled by millions. He survived ambushes, betrayals, and impossible odds. He built alliances with tribes who hated the Aztecs, and disease did what swords alone never could. By 1521, the Aztec capital had fallen. One of the greatest empires in the world was gone. Cortés didn't just win a battle. He changed the entire future of a continent. Did you know Kublai Khan sent 140,000 soldiers to conquer Japan, and the ocean destroyed them both times? Kublai Khan was born in 1215, the grandson of Genghis Khan. He grew up watching his family conquer half the world, and he was determined to finish what they started. By 1271, he had done something almost no one thought possible. He conquered China, unified it under Mongol rule, and built a court so magnificent that Marco Polo called it the greatest he had ever seen. Kublai ruled the largest empire in recorded history. But Japan was different. In 1274, he sent a massive fleet. A typhoon destroyed it. He tried again in 1281 with 140,000 men, the largest naval invasion the world had seen. Another storm wiped them out completely. The Japanese called those storms kamikaze, meaning divine wind. They believed the gods themselves had protected them. 6 centuries later, Japanese pilots flew into battle with that same word on their headbands. Kublai Khan conquered almost everything. The one thing he could not conquer became a myth that outlasted his entire empire. Did you know Cleopatra was actually Greek, not Egyptian? Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in Alexandria as part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal Greek family that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. Not one of them had bothered to learn Egyptian. Cleopatra did. She also learned 8 other languages, including Latin, Hebrew, and Aramaic. She was the first ruler her subjects could actually speak to directly. But she wasn't just a linguist. She was one of the sharpest political minds of the ancient world. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, she had herself smuggled into his presence, rolled inside a carpet. Within days, she had his support. Later, she allied with Mark Antony, and together they controlled much of the Eastern world. History remembers her as a seductress. That is the wrong story. She was a strategist fighting to keep Egypt free from Rome. She used every tool available because military force was the one thing she could never match. She lost in the end, but not because she wasn't smart enough. Rome was simply too powerful to outrun. Did you know an entire army sent to arrest Napoleon switched sides the moment they saw his face? Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1769 in Corsica, a small island that had just become French territory. He was mocked at military school for his accent and his outsider status. But Napoleon studied harder than anyone around him and graduated early. By his late 20s, he had conquered Italy and Egypt and made himself Emperor of France. His soldiers didn't just follow him, they worshipped him. He remembered their names, their battles, their scars. He made ordinary men feel like legends. But after defeat in Russia and across Europe, The great powers forced him into exile on the island of Elba in 1814. Most thought it was over. He escaped with just over 1,000 men. When the French army marched out to stop him, Napoleon walked forward alone and said, "If any of you would shoot your emperor, here I am." Not a single shot was fired. That is what charisma at its peak looks like.